Before we begin today's show, I want you to do one thing for me. Are you ready? Grab your cell phone, go to your contacts page, and put in this phone number if it's not already there. This is the switchboard for the U.S. Capitol, and you can reach any of your senators or representatives at this number. Are you ready? 202-224-3121. You didn't get that? I'm going to say it again. Get your phone, pull up the contacts, make a contact for the U.S. Capitol switchboard. Ready? 202-224-3121. All right, thanks. Now on with the show. Hey everybody, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here with a special bonus episode. I'm talking today with Austin and Ben from the Little Lobbyists. So hello guys.
Hello there.
Hi.
I'm so thrilled to have you guys with us. We had a previous episode where we talked to Peter and Fred, who went to DC on a trip to talk to congresspeople, and they had mentioned meeting up with the Little Lobbyists. And so this is really exciting to be able to come back and talk to you now. So let's start for my listeners who might not have any idea what I'm talking about. What is Little Lobbyists? What does your group do, and how did it get started?
So Little Lobbyists are a group of families who have children with complex medical needs. We advocate for our children's rights in society as far as community inclusion, access to healthcare, access to appropriate education. And we were formed by two wonderful families who realized they had to do something with everything going on with the healthcare bill. And so they sat at a kitchen table one night and thought, we're going to go and do one Hill visit. And we're going to share stories of our friends across the country who haven't been able to get hold of their senators and haven't been able to leave messages. And that Hill visit has turned into so many more. It's turned into 300 stories of children just like ours across the country. And it's turned into more Hill visits than I have the ability to remember tracking at this point.
So, Austin, you just used the term complex medical needs. So could you guys tell us a little bit about what that means? What are complex medical needs, and maybe what are some examples of the kinds of needs that these children have?
So complex medical needs means you have either needs that mean you see a number of doctors for different specialties, or you have numerous medical conditions that require pretty intensive amounts of time in the hospital. So you could say have cystic fibrosis, which is a lung disease, but even though it's considered a lung disease, you see multiple specialists because it involves other organs of your body. And then you have children like my daughter who have multiple diagnoses, and those diagnoses mean multiple specialists, and that's where the complex piece comes in.
Okay, and so Austin, you're the vice president of the group, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you first become aware of the group? How did you get involved?
So for me, my husband's active duty and another military spouse reached out to me via Facebook and said, oh, look at this group. They're here in DC, which is where I currently live, and they're looking for families like ours to submit their stories to their senators. And I went on the web page. I believe at the time it actually was a Facebook page. I went on the Facebook page and they were looking for Arizona stories. And since we're military, we're still Arizona residents. And I'm like, I have an Arizona story. And Elena, our president and co-founder, said, you have an Arizona story and you're DC? Join us tomorrow. And the very next day I was on the Hill with Ben. Ben was there as well, and a number of other families, and hit the ground running. And I'll admit, I was completely scared, had no idea what I was doing, but I knew it was important.
That's great. And so, Ben, you were already involved at that point.
Michelle and Elena, the two co-founders of the organization, actually met at a barbecue that my wife and I hosted when my son Pierce, who is now 4, came out of the hospital with a tracheostomy and a G-tube. It was a really small community. We didn't know anybody that had similar sorts of situations or lived with, complex medical needs. So my wife jumped on a Facebook group and, started networking. And so we felt that it was important, once we realized kind of who our community was, that we held a barbecue for families with trachs. And so both Elena and Michelle, actually, interestingly enough, met at our first barbecue that we had. And so they kind of then became good friends, and that's when they had the kitchen table talk and started this whole kind of organization. And I got on board shortly thereafter. My wife had been communicating with Michelle and with Elena, and I was available to go on the Hill, and so I showed up to one of the Hill visits. And that was where I met Austin, and it's been, 6 months ever since. Numerous Hill visits, and been super involved with the organization. So that's kind of how I got started.
Okay, and you're the treasurer of the group now?
I am, yes.
But you also work full-time, is that right?
I do, yes. I work full-time. I'm in property management, and so I do this really on the side and as much time as I possibly can, because it's really important to me and my family, and especially to my son, who has, multiple needs and uses a wheelchair to get around and is nonverbal and is deafblind. And so it's really important that, he has the best health care available to him. And so it's really passionate for me, and that's why I spend as much time as I do with them and work full time.
Yeah, I think that's a common thread that we're hearing. So we've been interviewing over the course of several months now, lots of people who are involved in groups that have started fairly recently. And that seems to be a very common thread, that, they might have full-time jobs or full-time other things that they're doing, raising families, but they've found an issue about which they're so passionate that, that's what they need to dedicate whatever time they have to doing.
Sure, I have to. And it's really important for Pierce to be able to, grow up and have everything that he possibly can. As parents, I think that most parents would agree, they do almost anything that they can for their children. And this is just, it's a little bit different for myself and the other families who are involved with the Little Lobbyists, but it's just as important to us as it is to other families to support our children as best we can. And this is one of the ways that I think that we can certainly support our children, in their needs as they grow up and turn into healthy, productive adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Do either of you have other children as well?
So I have 3 other children besides my youngest daughter, Melanie, and all of my children have varying degrees of mental health or health disabilities, but we advocate primarily for my 5-year-old because we attempt to protect the privacy of the other children, knowing that they are going to be in the workforce someday and that they are cognitively in a place where me talking about their healthcare needs could negatively impact them in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So we focus on my youngest, but know at the same time that it's not just about her. We're fighting for all of their futures. Like any other parent, we plan for our children's futures, except our plans require a lot more work.
Right, sure.
I do not yet, but in May, we are expecting a new child.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you've mentioned visits to the Hill. Is that the primary strategy that Little Lobbyist is using? How are the other ways that you're connecting either with other families or with congressional representation?
So we do Hill visits. I don't think that I would say that's the majority of our work. We do a lot on social media. A lot of our outreach is through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of families actually utilize Facebook as a communication tool to find other families who are experiencing the same things they are in life. And so I know that we have a very large community on Facebook who are living the lives that we're living and wanting to know how to advocate for themselves and for their families. And so there's a large piece there. I mean, there's Twitter, which everybody knows about, and we try to share as much information as we can. And then there are rallies and press conferences, and we really do anything and everything we can to tell our children's stories, to tell children's stories from across the country, and to have their voices be heard, because they're a really important part of what's going on in our government right now.
And so I was curious about the makeup of the group. So, obviously the people who you're primarily finding on Facebook are people who are parents of children with these complex medical needs. Is this a bipartisan group?
So we don't call ourselves bipartisan. We call ourselves nonpartisan.
Okay.
We don't believe that this is a partisan issue. This should be nonpartisan. Everybody should be looking out for the best interests of children, whether those children have complex medical needs or not. As a country, children are our future, and that is who we should be caring for. And we have members in our group locally and across the country who find themselves on both sides of political parties, but we all agree on this. We all agree that our children deserve the right to have a bright future and they need the protections in place to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways that certainly seems obvious. I completely agree with that sentiment, but it's rare to have issues these days that are completely nonpartisan. Certainly, I think that's great that you accept people from both sides. It's just so rare to see that. It's an interesting thing to note.
It really is about our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And what is best for them. So regardless of what political affiliation or what in Congress, whatever side of the aisle is working on what is best for our children, that's who we're going to support. So if it's a bipartisan bill, then we support both sides. And if it's one side or the other, then we will support that. But it's really comes down to our children and what's best for our children and how to advance their needs, their rights, and make sure that they're taken care of now and in the future. And a lot of it really comes down not only to just advocating on the Hill and with our legislators, but also education. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people, don't understand complex medical needs or children with disabilities or people with disabilities in general. And I think it's really important that we educate the general public and also our legislators who don't see this side of the world on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Have you found that you've been successful in being able to educate your senators and representatives? Have they been receptive to the kinds of work that you're trying to do?
Yes, I think that really, especially on the Hill and on Capitol Hill, everybody really loves to see our kids. It's very different to see children, and especially parents and children with oxygen tanks and ventilators and medical supplies and wheelchairs kind of rolling down the halls of Congress. But what I think is really interesting about that is the fact that the awareness is really interesting. So we'll sit down with legislators and staffers, and we will tell them kind of what our plights are and what's really important to us. And almost every single time when we come out of a meeting, somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know that." It's just the way that it happens because, unless you're really involved in this world, it's not something that a lot of people are aware of. And so education really is huge. And I think we are making a difference because people are saying that to us.
Have you had any particular legislative successes, would you say, or is this something that's sort of more of a long-term trying to get the message across?
I think that that's really hard to gauge, just given the current, political atmosphere. How many medical bills that would cut the ACA or cut down funding for Medicaid have come and gone, and we've certainly taken those as victories, and we've taken the recent GOP tax bill as a loss. Whether we are primarily responsible or not, I don't believe we are. I believe that all of the groups who are coming together across the country, letting their voices be heard, are the reason that things have turned out so positively leading up to this bill. Mm-hmm. But I think for us in Little Lobbyists, this is the long game, right? Like, we are talking about planning our children's futures, and as these legislators and staffers and interns get to know our children, then when they're making laws or when they're thinking about changing things, it's our children they're going to be thinking about. It's no longer somebody on paper, but it's that child they met running into their office and hugging them, or telling them a story about their weekend and showing them that they're just kids. Our kids are just kids who happen to have complex medical needs. And I think that's the piece that changes the whole atmosphere and the landscape of what's happening, is our kids are putting a face and a personification on something that was before numbers on paper.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, we keep hearing about how much of Congress is sort of dictated now by who they're able to fundraise from or what the party is doing. And I think really being able to put that face and that story to the bills that they're considering, I think really can have a big difference. So I think that that's really fantastic that you're able to do that. What does this new tax bill mean for the families in your group? I know you said you're taking it as a loss, and understandably, what are some of to the best anyone can tell about the tax bill right now, what are some of the sort of real world consequences that you think might happen because of this bill?
So